Welcome back, one and all, to the LJLOU's coverage of this semi-finals matchup between V3 Esports and Rascal Jester here in spring 2021. That's a long-winded way of winding up to say V3 Esports are on the precipice of moving on to take on Detonation Focus Me in the finals, and what a wild ride they've been on.
Absolutely. They are edging closer and closer, towing that line to get themselves towards a grudge rematch of the 2020 finals in the
Mm.
spring lower bracket, the semifinals, I suppose, of the last year to face off against DFM. Yet again, it would be three playoffs, three best of fives between those two teams, and they are one game away. Rascal Jesters still hanging on. They do have the ability to reverse sweep. We know that they have happened often in League, surprisingly often. The adaptation needs to come now, though, and it needs to come very, very strong.
There is no more dangerous point in a series than being 2-0 up, I tend to find.
Congratulations, V3. There's no way that Rascal Jesters come back from a 0-2.
Cloud9 out there haunting us all these years. That said, looking pretty dire right now for the Jesters. They've struggled to find a game plan that works. They've struggled to keep Hatchemetcha off vision in the early game, and that is a team job. The early vision wards have made a lot of work, or made a lot of done a lot of work. That's the way we phrase it for the side of V3. Cog is pretty imperious in the top side, and these mid-game compositions from V3 have done wonders for them.
Well, I mean, it's mid into late game
Mm.
compositions too, right? Playing around the Jinx, having Seraphine. Those are
Mm.
definitely things you can keep reprising, keep saying, yeah, if this game reaches hyper late game, we will just win. I think the big thing for me, again, is the fact that Cog is not losing in lane against stuff like the Camille, against the Renekton, stuff which, if they do get ahead, can mean that Na doesn't win in late game scenarios, gets
Mm.
forced out of side lanes, doesn't get to have that same team fighting impact. But because Cog has been so damn good on that little prehistoric Yordle, this has really stabilized the compositions and all states of the game for V3.
I think the other thing for Rascal Jess is they need to make some of their early plays actually stick. They have just not really got all that much mileage out of what they've been trying to do in the early game. They maybe get a kill, but no objective, and then still have to burn a lot to get it. That's always a frustration, particularly in that last game when they did go towards the Callista. The dragon stacking didn't happen. The bot lane dives didn't really happen. Again, it's challenging into the side of a Braum and a sort of an Olaf that just seemed to be everywhere at once. Really tracked the opposing team's attempted plays very well. Muujin is also really stepping up here when it counts, and Hachimecha needs to find a new lease on life, probably with the assistance of his team, to make sure he's not getting so scouted out, honestly, in these early games. We've kind of been talking about.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because it is often about, what we keep saying, that information battle, the information
Mhm.
war, and who's winning it, who's losing it, what are you gaining from it? Well, what you're gaining from it with something like an Olaf who, can just hoover through jungle camps, win those duels against the Hecarim pre-6, and this is the big thing, right? If you end up taking those camps, you keep the Hecarim away from that point for longer and longer into this game.
Mm.
Question for me is, okay, so there are two ways about this. You can win that bot lane 2v2. That's fine. We saw that in both games in terms of, you can get priority and you can start making some plays around that. But you need to do one of two things. Change the jungle matchup or change the top lane matchup. You need pressure from somewhere to stabilize the map. And it is all about stabilization. So it feels like right now, Rascal Jester are in freefall.
Yeah. Either get yourself some jungle pressure, or if you're going to play through bot, then actually play through bot. Like, one attempted gank that gets one kill just about is not what you need to see, especially if you are leaving Kanatu to weak side, who, in fairness, didn't fall more than the 10 CS behind and the stuff, but he was still struggling to hold pressure in lane more than anything. And especially if you are trying to play through a Callista, then you need more out of it than just that single kill
Exactly.
and no
I mean,
dragons to stack with.
it's one of the things which Sengoku did really well, right? And it's how they beat Dead Nation Focus Me in the first time they played. If you got a
Mhm.
Callista, you just show your hand and you say, get away from your turret. This is ours now. Go somewhere else. It's very much like how you play around the likes of your Caitlyn's or your Poke Varuses. You just crush through that laning phase. You don't make brook any kind of argument against it. Whereas Rascal Jester, they kind of tried to go towards top lane again, try and make something happen around holding down this Gnar. But they did that at the expense of, not playing around the strong part of the map, and they got slapped for it.
Yeah, and even things like the Herald not coming to fruition, as we
Salt in the
mentioned, the
wound.
Dragon stacking, yeah, that is just not what you need to be seeing either. but what it does do is put V3 in a great position for the rest of this series, however long it may last. We're looking like a 3-0 shutout right now. Like there's not much more to say about it, unless Rascal Jesters managed to find a new lease on life. Of course, it was an
Oh gosh.
improvement in game two, and where we've switched timelines there briefly. I picked up Nightmare
So
Beta.
welcome. It is 2-0 to Rascal Jesters right now. No, not quite. Sadly, I'm not going to dupe you like that. Of course, it is game 3 and it's match point over to V3. And the hilarious thing to me is, so we do have predictions going on in our own Discord server. You can
We
find
do.
the link to us below the stream as well and all the stuff like that. Love to
On the
hear from
stream.
you if you are
Right
interested
there.
in getting involved in our community. There was one person that voted for V3 against Sengoku. And through the entirety of us, the three of us that are on broadcast most of the time, the mainstream over in the
What
LJL,
can I say?
there's one person that voted for V3, and that was the Pope of PP God's Church from the LPL, who belongs to a team V5. So the V5 to
Exactly.
V3 buff has
This is
come
it.
yet again. And right now, I fear that we've awoken some kind of ancient, Japanese prophecy. We had like, the Aztec Mayan calendar of 2012. I mean, I don't know what's happened about this year and everything that's happened before it, but seems like we've unearthed some real occult stuff here.
Yeah, dangerous indeed, that's for sure. Like, again, it's been a great journey for V3. Started off the split so well. Very happily, the second place team, Cog pulling out things like Ivan top, looking to be really creative and dangerous with his champion pool. And then it's this midpoint in the split. And suddenly V3 just can't seem to find a strategy that worked. The shift in meta really hurt them. They were struggling to play through top the same way they
Their
were
weird stuff
beforehand.
stopped working.
Weird stuff stopped working. They came into playoffs and went, well, they've just not beaten the top teams above them, right? That's problematic. They're going against Hawks, which maybe is a bit risky here. They go to 5 games against Hawks, and it's like, oh boy, this isn't looking good. The
It's a
Tristana top
tough
not
series
working.
too. Tough series.
It was, and it's like, oh boy, they're gonna get rolled by Sengoku. It's a 3-2 to V3. They find the change in style that works. They've moved on to this series now, and the Jinx is still coming out, and it's looking so convincing here. And
But
there's no Samira pick for the side of Seoul yet. There's nothing like that would be helping out. So V3 just on the up and up. The might have been down in the dumps, but the climb back up Mount Olympus has been a strong one.
Just a quick cast back in history to not too long ago in that summer 2020 playoffs. We
I
are
was
into
wondering
Big
about
Ban.
that.
Remember that there was a team which got, a 5-game series in the first round. And then they had, a bit of a closer series in the next round too. And then DFM took all the way to 5 games in the finals and was such a strong team there. V3 looking to flip the name cards and hopefully come out with a win themselves, actually, if they do reach those finals. But they'll have to seal it here, and they are back on the red side. Sides are the same.
What a surprise. We've got ourselves something of a mirror of summer, but instead of V3 awaiting in the finals, it's Detonation Focus Me and V3 running the gauntlet. That said, if we want that narrative to hold true and the script writers to have it all elegantly planned out, V3 need to win this game or one of the next 2. Bans remain the same for the 3rd game in a row. The Hecarim is back. And I really don't hate the Hecarim. I don't, but you need to protect it a little bit better. You need to stop Muujin from getting so much out of those early minutes in the jungle. Nah and Jinx are the response again. It's not quite a full salty run back, but it's certainly a salty starter. There's the Renekton again.
What's the change?
See, what is the change?
What's the change?
Is exactly it. Orianna, it's not going to be a change.
Why don't you pick the Seraphine here? If you want to start, put up your late game a little bit more, you can go towards that. Nothing has changed massively from the side of Rascal Jester. You're probably looking at losing your top side. You're probably looking at getting outscaled because of that Jinx, because of the fact you've locked in an early game champion on that top side too into the Gnar. You're going into the same combo of the Jinx Braum. Rascal Jester, what are you going to do to change things up? You've got slapped the first 2 games.
And it's a mirror of the last game. It's the saltiest run back in the first 3 picks you could ask for. And now, yeah, exactly. We've got to see whether they just think the Callista was the right call and we just need to work better with it, which I can see. It worked well in lane, but you got to get more out of it early. Let's see whether there's a response from RJ here. Do they ban the Seraphine? Do they ban the Olaf? Again, no bad calls there either.
But, I mean, the other thing you can do, we saw in the LPL, you can actually go Ignite on the Hecarim if you want. Try and play around having a stronger early game to bridge you over to the level 6. Rascal Jester is instead going to ban out the globals. The Nocturne, of course, important as you were saying.
Same bans.
Twisted Fate, it is exactly the same bans. We are actually salty run back in game 2 so far. Ace has the ability to pick up the Seraphine again. I don't see why you would stop doing that, Rascal Jester. They picked the Callista set here before. They're going towards the Aphelios this time. All right, so you played that in game 1. And the Lulu comes out. Now,
all right,
this is
that's what
different.
we're talking about it. All right, well, I like it.
It's an enchanter to bully the Braum. It is something which, again, buffs up your late game because you have the extra attack speed and the extra survivability onto your Aphelios. You don't have a Tahm Kench to devour the Aphelios, keep them safe, but you do have the wild growth. You do have the shields, and now you have the Whimsy too. Double cleanse was briefly being run. With the cleanse heal, I think that actually, reach yourself late game at this point with the Aphelios. Look, it's still not great. You're against the Seraphim. You're against a Jinx. The Seraphim can build up all the support items that the Jinx needs anyway. Rascal Jester says it's different. Is it different enough?
They've still got a front line. They've got a Whimsy and a Distortion to speed up Hatchamecha. They've got a Wild Growth to keep somebody alive. And on top of that, you really want to screw over an Olaf or a Nard charging at you with arms yelling and all the rest of it. Well, you turn them into a bunny rabbit. Polymorph
or
ruins Mega Knot combos.
That, or you have the, you have the not Dark Candy because that's Fiddlesticks, but you have the, the crying cupcakes. Those are my favorite ones.
I mean, that's just it, right? I genuinely think Polymorph could really ruin the likes of some of these divers. Gnar is on a particular time window, and if you halve that time window, you have him coming in full steam ahead and just turns into a small fluffy animal. It becomes a lot hard to find the combos they're looking for.
And speaking of, finding it hard to find the combos, find the CC, find the damage, think about game 1 and that Everfrost coming out from LeBlanc, which kind of buffed that up a little bit for the side of E3. Now that you have the extra move speed, the cleanse, and the heal coming out of this duo, the Aphelios Lulu, if you go forwards as the Olaf, you miss your axe, Sol just turns it around on you. With that extra move speed and the attack speed, expect to get absolutely torn apart. I mean, when you get to 3-4 items, you have a Lord Doms in. Sol has the actual chance to turn things around, and whereas the Callista can kind of struggle against some of these more brawlery, bruisery frontliners if they have something like a Stride Breaker, Theos has no such issues.
Well, we like the transition here for the Jesters, I think it's fair to say, but V3 are still very comfortable with their composition. It's not like Jinx doesn't have targets to be hitting here. And V3 once again with an interesting level 1 play, hiding around that bush, looking to punish.
This has been so entertaining. I mean, again, it looks like nothing is happening, but this has happened. This led to a kill in, I mean, if you watched, I think it was SK versus Fnatic over on the LEC, similar things happened there. We saw things happen between V3 and Sengoku in, in the lower bracket in round 2.
Here we go.
We're going to see Kog'Kog and Mujin spotted out by Kanatu, not hit by the undertow. Kanatu going to get out of this safely, I think.
Far enough at the end of the bush to not be in danger. Second undertow misses, and that's actually quite a lot of mana down for this Olaf at level 1.
It is, but he's also trying to take the blue buff. Since you're not, well, is Recap going to shield this? No, they're not. Hatchamecha instead. Heading up to the Raptors, going to keep using that Rampage for the AoE onto those chickens. It's not quite Lilia. Turns out those Centaur-like people will take those pretty well.
And speaking of junglers that can adapt pretty well, that's a nice one from Hatchamecha. Knows what's going on with Mujin, but he's just going to trade over for the red side quadrant. He's not on vision critically, so they don't know where he is right now, which is potentially quite a big deal. He's going to get the red buff, might be able to even get the Krugs as well, assuming he can slip past the vision line of the minions, of course. That's always a trouble when you're invading onto those Krugs, so keep an eye on that. Instead, he's just going to take the Raptors, take the red buff, and maybe look for a level 2 gank into the mid lane here.
He doesn't have it. He can't do it. I was actually wondering if that's going to be the case, because the way that Hecarim gets ganks in mid lane is very specific. You have to run behind them and shunt them back. You can force out a flash. That's the way you play things. Because he didn't level up that devastating charge, wasn't any chance of that coming through. Of course, you go for the W, because every time something gets damaged within your W, you get a healing of a percentage of the damage done to those characters in that, which means if you're going Raptors are Raptors, again, very Lilia-like start, you do want that for the extra damage and the healing that comes through. It means that Hatchamecha has managed to get a 2-camp steal away from Mujin at the cost of 3 camps away from his top side, so it is going to be 1 camp down. Hopefully this time, though, they won't get double scuttle, whereas Mujin is still rampant on this map. They're going to have to, again, Rascal Jester, avoid this Olaf.
The later this game goes, Jesters get more and more potent, which makes sense. Orianna, Aphelios, backed up by a Lulu, is a pretty nasty late game combo, I grant you. We'll see, of course, whether it works out that way. Statistically, 2% advantage out of draft for V3 right now, which I can sort of see with some of the picks in that. Olaf has been very strong.
And as we
for
know,
the LJL,
numbers
and
don't
Seraphine,
lie.
real strong. No, they don't. But stats might not lie, but of course, interpretations certainly can. We've had that conversation already today.
There we have. So, Kanati at least knows that he's going to have topside scuttle vision. That helps. Mugen running up towards that topside is not going to get there just in time. It is the scuttle trade, but with Mugen having some extra camps respawning as things go along, looks like the V3 jungler still happy with that state of affairs. Question is this time, are you going to get the XP lead and then find Hatchemetra or find a fight in general before Hatchemetra has that Onslaught of Shadows and doesn't have that level 6 spike?
The wolves are about to respawn, so Hatchemetra might get a hold of those. Of course, the wrap to start from Hatchemetra meant that they respawned a little earlier. Cog takes a nasty cold meek there. Mini-Nar, not a particular fan of that.
Yeah, he had a really good combo there, man. Just get the Empowered W, which allows him time to auto-cancel on his Q, get the extra dice on the Slice and Dice out. Hatchemetra going to lose one of the... He's going to lose both small Raptors, but he does get the big one. That is still a lot of the XP. And Mugen, though he has been... Well, he's actually going to stick around with Ace.
I don't know how much pressure he has here. I mean, there's a teleport, I suppose, but it'd be very bold. I don't think Mugen wants to stick around here.
Fair to say, not sure that one might be a camp too far for the suicidal Viking, who literally is just a Viking that just wants to fight things and meet a glorious end. No glorious end met in that jungle camp though, and he's going to go back up towards his Krugs. Rascal Jester not ceding as much pressure as they have done in previous games so far. Bot lane is a double cull start. This is important because both of them likely starting last stand to do extra damage to the more HP stacking members, stuff like the Olaf, Gnar, and the Braum. So looking to see what both these ADs characters can do from that side. Actually, I'm completely lying. Both of them actually start with Torrent's Blade and are back for the cull after those resets.
Yeah, Hollow got to go back a little later though, so had the boots to his name as well as everything
Hooray
else.
for situational awareness.
Hooray for situational awareness and eyes, which is always a nice touch if you're a color caster, apparently. But my one certainly doesn't know what they are. So, you know, we have to deal with it. Kinatu does take the rough end of that particular trade, but does have a pretty heavy rage bar and can, of course, teleport back in. Cog has already done so, so Kinatu will be looking to match that now.
Well, one of the changes about Renekton in the series, one of the nerfs was when you're using that Q on waves, it just does less healing. It's only something, it's like 2 per minion, but that can be like an extra, 10, 20 HP knocked off your full heal. And that can be very important when you are trying to take extended trades and then try and take in an extended laning phase. You need to have a couple of those on a wave to keep yourself within those damage calculations when it comes to those all-ins.
With the wave shoved in, Cog will also take himself a bit back here and match the steel caps that Kanatu got off his teleport. Also picks up a pink ward as well.
That's the GameStop axe, by the way, because it was shorted on the scuttle.
What was it? Okay. When he went into the bush as well, you could call that like a hedge.
More things I do not know about terminology. But okay, so right now, Hecarim, not level 6, going to take away all of the small raptors, and the big raptor will reset. So a little takeaway from Hatchemetra. From Mugen's jungle. Sol and
Gardener Olaf gonna continue funding those hedges and move on, and so we're gonna get a binding eclipse in bot lane as well. And I apologize for that pun; it hurt me today, actually.
Man, well, hopefully looking a little bit less diamond
hands,
more
these
challenger
again?
hands.
Stop fighting over wolves.
More challenger hands in this one. That's what they're hoping for. Hatchemetra just. If that wolf had been stolen away, that would have been just the worst case scenario. Sol not quite stunned up with the concussive blows. Bot lane for Rascal Jesters, again, strong 2v2 duo. These players have done so much this split. Mugen has still managed to, even though not quite cleanly get that same advantage, still has an advantage nonetheless. Now, Kinatu has vision on Mugen, who's going to throw an axe at the wave, push it in. And we're waiting now again for the first big play. It does look like a little bit of a trade in pressure across the map. Sol and Secret using the early enchant to power spike in the laning phase to get themselves a slight CS lead and a plate down on bot side.
That they do. Of course, it isn't over yet. It's still going on pretty evenly. It's a slight advantage.
No, we can go. We can go home.
It's
go to
exactly.
bed.
Indeed.
It's over.
But also got to call out, Mugen, despite a lot of invades, hasn't managed to get an absolutely obscene lead like he has in a couple games in this series. And that's great news if you're Hatchemetcha and Rascal Jester's fan. And Cog pulling up some stats here. Those are real nice stats for this semi-finals, or just a spring in general. Had a great time of it right now. Continuing to be a menace on this now.
12.2 KDA on the pick, which is supposed to be counterable. That is supposed to be weaker than the pros really recognize. It just hasn't been a factor for Cog or many players in the LJL. Heck, I think Cog maybe has even been our most successful now this split. Even Ebby has been countered by Liza Kanatu.
Yeah, there's also something to be said for just the fact that actually there aren't that many players in the LJL that are comfortable with Gnar counter picks. We don't have that many Aurelia top players. We don't have that many Camille players. Really,
we miss
very,
you,
very
top lane Dasher. We miss you.
Indeed. Though I will say that was a bit of a sort of I will shove in to die every time. He was taking the Darien school of thought a little bit too far, to throw back to an old season 3-4 meme. Gosh, that's 7 years out of date.
at the inhibitor running around the base.
the Zonya's Renekton will always live in my heart. Going to see potentially a bot lane dive, though, as Hatchemetcha is on vision, and so will not get
Herald?
that dive off. The Herald was taken, but it's coming at a lot of plates here.
So Kanatu's actually popping the Dominus to fill his rage bar, so he gets the empowered damage to clear out that wave early. I don't mind that adaptation. Use that ultimate to just be like, okay, this is the extra amount of the safety I can get with this. Mugen, as kind of a follow-on effect, does get those top lane camps. Kanatu, I don't think spots the recall, nor does he spot the control ward. Kanatu is forced off a wave, doesn't lose any plates just yet, it didn't actually lose that last wave to tower either. So actually, in terms of, again, this whole top lane dynamic of, okay, well, Coco's been winning out, seems like it's more stable this time for Rascal Jester, and that's a term we've used quite a lot in regards to what Rascal Jester need in this game.
Rascal Jester's pull away from that dive they were considering there, but they do get nearly 4 plates down in this bot lane, which is great news for them. They've struggled to get plates throughout this series, but this time out, the Aphelios, the Lulu, certainly winning out with the range discrepancy out between these two support picks.
Let me see. So now we have this kind of arms race, right? We have Seraphine waiting to build up to several items into that late game. Probably not going to go for the Putrefier second this time. If I hazard a guess, more likely to go again towards something like Staff of Flying Water for the move speed for your Gnar and your Olaf. So you have that on one side, with your Jinx again being very powerful. And if you get yourself an Ardent Sensor, you can empower that in the same way that Lulu wants to empower the other person in this veritable race of warring materials, this Aphelios. If Aphelios gets to enough items, you dive in with an Arnie Olaf, you just die. We're even in gold right now. No dragon's really taken. Yes, it is a lead to Rascal Jester, one of the first we've seen in this series. The question is, again, when it comes to these first team fights, who is going to be at the point of power? And again, who has the ease of execution on their draft?
That was very nice to watch Slice Dyson and the Cole the Meek to clear the whole wave there. I enjoyed watching that. Just very satisfying.
It's like one of my favorite League of Legends memories was when we saw, well, I mean, maybe time for that later when the dragon's not spawned, but remember the slow-mo replays of really satisfying waveplay combos when Lulu would just like double glitter lance the entire backline and the minions would just like all start dying in tandem. That was pretty fun.
Beautiful. That's not happening right now, though. Sol has got himself Infernum and Gravitum for the upcoming dragon. Of course, I don't know how much ammo he's got. Actually,
you say that just as he changes out to just Sephiroth.
I know. I literally saw it there. Spiny Eclipse coming down as well, trying to get some poke out. Glitter Lance coming through as well. And Hatchemetcha's around with recap. They could think about diving this. Instead, they'll just pick up that 4th plate. And the threat of Hatchemetcha is enough to buy space and time for that one to go down.
Is for now. So Ace has no mana, importantly. I think this should really well, I mean, he does have the teleport coming off a cooldown. I just saw it, but it was regenerating a lot quicker than I was used to. I'm like, okay, he has just used the spellbook. And what does that mean? It means that he can teleport back to the fight. And Hatchemetcha starting on the dragon already. Is this going to be a trade for a top lane dive? Kanatu, pop the Dominus already.
Has popped the Dominus already, looking to get as much down as he can. That's the encore, and he falls down for first blood. Ace teleports up, and they get that one cleanly. Of course, there is no minion wave, so they can't necessarily look to get the tower straight away.
No, so it is going to be a dragon trade. Well, actually, no, the dragon was peeled off of. And they do have themselves there. Mugen is taking tower shots to increase his attack speed on the tower. Now, that is a micro...
I love that.
Optimization.
They're going to try and rush for first tower here. They're going to get a lot of plates off this more than anything. There was so many to go for. First turret going to go down to, drum roll, Olaf and the side of V3. Not enough of a wave in bot side for Rascal Jester to get it there.
No, it is going to be Renekton zoned off the wave as opposed to Jinx. I think that's more important that Jinx is not quite getting that farm. Although on the other side of it, you can say, well, okay, there's this question of backline scaling versus frontline scaling. Because if Jinx gets the first kill because Renekton is not very strong, doesn't have a Sterak's or something like that built up in a critical fight, then they get excited. That's very bad for Rascal Jester to play against. In the last game, we saw that Rascal Jester kind of chose to continue some fights against an excited Jinx, and that was really not the play to make. However, if Jinx doesn't have enough damage because she herself was didn't have access to the farm around these tower trades and stuff like that, maybe they don't have the damage to finish off their Renekton. So it's a bit of give and take, a little bit of advantages traded across the board, and we're yet really to see what's going to happen with these team fights and whether Kanatu can kind of pilot these team fights without the same amount of gold being injected into that Renekton.
And you can see the gold here. Yeah, that's once again fairly significant leads for the top jungle duo of V3. A lot of that, of course, is that first tower plus all plates going down to the pair of them, which certainly infused a fair amount of gold in there. That's a hell of an investment coming through. And they're feeling pretty happy about that. It gives the V3 suddenly a bit of a gold lead in this game, though only of a few hundred. But, of course, it's been traded for a relatively late first dragon on the side of Rascal Jester.
And it is. So, no early dragon stacking. I think that's okay for both these teams because the question is when you're taking early dragons, particularly when so many trades are happening around the map, are you giving up too much in a dragon for gold lead? And that's something that you talked about a little bit earlier in the day. And I think in this game, when actually there is more parity in scaling, there is a chance that this will reach late game. You can't be quite so hasty to reach towards those neutral objectives.
Yes, I kind of agree.
Oh, Mugen's not been spotted.
Oh, Mugen's potentially in a bit of spot there. I used the Ragnarok to buy space. It takes a lot of damage, remember, with the Ragnarok. There's a teleport coming through, and Cog's in a difficult position as well. Not quite enough damage. Ace over the back could cause some trouble. The beat drop forces Kanatu into a difficult position. The Mega Death Rocket doesn't get a lot. The Onslaught of Shadows trying to get onto Cog, but the Encore stops him dead. And that actually Megadar was massive. They're going to try and get forwards. A wallop pulls Hachimetra in a difficult position, but there's enough shielding and damage to buy space. Recap being slowed, gets over the wall with the blast cone, but Cog still on the hunt, trying to get some more. He might now be a little bit deep. Kunatu thinking about going over the wall, but does hop away. Does Cog. This Herald still being started by V3, but Rascal Jesters aren't done yet. Mugen still very low. No Ragnarok, but does have Flash. Healing up pretty well. Ace buying space. No Encore big time to keep an eye on. Flame Chompers come down, zoning Soul away. Herald goes down. Soul's in a very difficult position, taken so low. The Bone Meringue is there and forced to flash out of the AD carry of Rascal Jesters. And once again, the setup around that objective was not clean. And Mugen is going to walk straight up to recap. The Strike Breaker is there and forced to flash in turn, but he's going straight over the wall. The Undertows are there and dragged under is Orion. He's going to keep going. Hinatu's so low, he gets a double. Mugen finds the ultimate cooldown he needs, has regened enough throughout the course of that play, finds one pick, channels it into another. Kanatu should never have walked up to Mugen once he'd popped that ultimate, had the Triumph coming through, and had the Conqueror stacked up as well. Rascal Jester are falling apart at the seams. Straight to Valhalla, courtesy of the axes of one rampaging Viking. No Ragnarok, no problem. And at first, I thought this was going to look really good for Rascal Jesters.
Yeah, so did I. But then Hachimetra uses the Devastating Charge onto a Ragnaroking Olaf. And importantly here, the knockup of the Braum ultimate stops the follow-up Ace in the Calibrum auto coming out from the Aphelios. Gets the mark onto Braum, but the Olaf is already out of range. Hachimetra goes way too deep onto the Gnar when his team cannot follow up at that point. It burns a heal, it burns a wild growth. And honestly, it's kind of the story of this series for Hachimetra, just not really judging the engage as well and costing his team something. Sol has himself the Calibrum and the Infernum at that point, and there was a turret being put down, which meant that actually some of the AoE from the Flamethrower was dangerously close to killing off Mugen, but he is the only person with threat at this point. Kinatu takes poke. No one else can stand up alongside this Aphelios, and it's basically Sol versus the world. or at least V3 in their entirety. It's not nearly enough for Recap and the rest of them to really follow up. Muujin finds one pick on the back end of it, stacks up the Conqueror, and what are you doing here? You don't have Dominus, you do have a Flash, there's no point in pathing that way. You should know at that point that is a one-way trip. There's not one that's going to get you anything out of it.
I think he just got Ragnarok back up at the end of that fight as well. Like, that's kind of nuts, actually. It's,
well, I mean, you time that. You have to time that. You need to know what's happening. Either way, disrespectful from Rascal Jesters, and that disrespect leads to a sizable amount of gold, once again going to the pockets of V3.
What was a good start for Rascal Justice has quickly turned into another nightmare. There's not even a Nocturne on the Rift this time. Olaf critically far ahead. The rest of this comp still very strong, and Cog gets another tower, and that's now 5
gold just
turrets
flows in.
to 1. Puts them up
Exactly.
4,000 gold right now, and Kinati's going to try and get to this tier 2 in bot, but I don't know how safe he's going to be as Sol. Maybe in danger as well, but enough vision around to keep him safe. Recap might at least get this tower in topside to staunch the bleeding a little bit, but it's still going to be a 3-turret discrepancy in favor of V3.
And it's 2 levels in the jungle, 2 levels in top. This is an XP deficit now for the entirety of the team. Well, across the board for Rascal Jester. Yeah, it's not across. It doesn't show up in all of those roles, and you do see, even in mid across there. But having so little levels and gold onto your top jungle duo, who are your primary tanks, we're talking about that frontline versus backline scaling. I think that V3 are just going to shred through these team fights. There's a Jinx ult going into mid lane to try and clear out the wave, and Muujin comes in with a Strikebreaker.
He does, and Sol avoids the zap as well, but the wave goes, and that means they can't get the mid lane turret. Dragon number 2 is alive, and Olaf goes, well, I can guess I go over this and solo this, because
you
no
don't
way you
fight
get
for
over
Rascal
here.
Jester. You need to buy time. You need to get more gold. Rascal Jesters are not willing to fight at this point. You don't have Flash and Aphelios. That's very, very important. You probably want to fight when you at least maybe just stall this out until 4 items. Try and wait for V3 to stack up those extra dragons coming through and see if you can trade for it. It's going to be an Infernal Rift. Dangerous if you let them get to Soul Point. But it's still something which I think now that's the route you have to take. You don't have the liberty of taking things at your own pace. You need to just try and hunker down and get yourself items on that in Aphelios until that fight comes.
And as we speak about it, that second item does get completed for us. He does now have a Runan's Hurricane. That's good news for Rascal Jesters. That's great, but
good news, everybody.
It does get a little bit scary because, of course, Ace already at the Putrefier second, which I know we said was a little bit more unlikely, but it is very helpful versus the Lulu, bringing some healing, of course, with the Moonstone herself, versus the Aphelios, who's bringing a lot of his own healing. There are a lot of options here, I think, worth kind of going towards that Putrefier, and does get picked up, but second items in for Cog as well, and these item discrepancies are going to continue to build. So that's 2 items versus Ruby Crystals for this Renekton.
So it's important to note that Wild Growth doesn't count as a heal and therefore is not cancelled out by the Putrefier. It just counts as an extra bulk amount of HP coming in. Same with the Dominus, 2 things which won't be turned, down-tuned by that Putrefier. Now, have ourselves the good old J-Ram as we have 10 man strong into this mid lane. Cog does have ult running forward, and he's going. He keeps going.
There's still a Lulu there and a Polymorph available, so I think it does get a bit risky stepping forward too much, but it zones everybody away while the rest of V3 escort these waves into 2 inhibitor towers. And I don't know how easy Rascal Jester is actually finding to get in here. Cog's now in a difficult position, has to flash away. Hatchemetcha with a devastating charge active, could think about going forwards. Muujin taken real low. I think you go for this if you're a Jesters, but they've got themselves a lot of options. Hollow very in danger. The Chilling Smite forces him to flash. Hatchemetcha still getting sped up, still going forwards. That horse really wants to pull off the charge, but they won't manage it, and V3 burn a couple summoners. Hell, it's only there's a flash on Cog, flash on Hollow, but they get the inhibitor turret.
They do. One of the problems with looking for that fight is that Sol didn't really have the long-range weapons, didn't really have the ability to follow up with either the move speed from the onslaught of Severum or having, your Caliburn for the extra mark. Hatchemetcha now going to get himself chunked out yet again. Baron is available. They do have an Olaf. The Jinx is strong too, and of course, Seraphine can allow them to just continually heal and shield up. Cog has Mega again too. This is a point where V3 are very happy to just pull Rascal Jester around the map.
It is a wall of red in this river in terms of vision, and in goes Cog with the encore coming through as well. Kinatu stunned up and into the backside. The onslaught of shadows from Hatchemetcha trying to buy space and time, but he's stunned in place. The concussive blows, keeping the pony down, and into glue he goes. Kinatu shoved into the wall. The Gnar gets that one. Hollow gets another. That's a big shockwave, though. And Gnar is there, but Ace still alive. The heals and shields keep him there. It's a 1 for 2 in favor of V3. but the HP discrepancies probably means Baron's not an option.
Oh, so close. The Encore actually caught Secret in it as well. Kinatu was the primary target. As soon as the Lulu started just like blindly walking forward with that charm effect on, I thought, oh no. V3 have found themselves a really good fight, and Rascal Jesters might just be out of it. This is still not the worst case scenario for Rascal Jester. I'm going to go back to the replay. Where does it start again? It starts with Cog just being such a menace in that front line, forcing them, the side of Rascal Jesters, of course, to try and face check. And you were right about saying, oh, Polymorph, really important to get up against that Mega Nut. Doesn't manage to get a really good ultimate off, and that means that Sol gets to free fire, gets to continually turn things around, and when he does have himself the Mega Infernum Bomb, the Infernum ultimate, things get a bit dicey. Recap with the Shockwave Wave yet again has been a real force in these team fights, and one of the things keeping Rascal Jester in these late game fights. It's just not been enough against the AoE shielding of the Seraphine. At least this time you do have a better scaling AD carry than the Callista, but we can see what happens against that Seraphine. She's just such a powerful champion.
Another Amp Tome, and Recap gets the double there. Ace dies as well, and suddenly it's 2 for 2, and things look a lot better. It wasn't quite enough, and now we come back out, and stopwatches are in inventory. There's a couple more items in for, say, Hollow as well, who's now at 2 items as well, though, of course, Sol pretty strong on this affair as well. The big difference, though, I think, for this fight, Seraph's now complete for Orianna. Recap, if he can land another one of those shockwaves, might be able to turn around. There's not that much frontline for V3.
No, well, this is the problem. You don't have much frontline for the side of Rascal Jester, and Hatchemetcha having to buy up some shields. But just look at Cog. He's so much more annoying, so much more confident than Kinatu and Hatchemetcha, and that could be the telling point of this game. Because if your frontline doesn't survive, the Jinx gets excited. We know how bad things go from there.
Conditional frontline versus conditional frontline. Enchanter versus Enchanter. Hyperscaling AD carry versus hyperscaling AD carry. That's what you call a bit of a mirror matchup in some ways. Of course, the gold advantage is certainly not mirrored because V3 is still up about that 3,000 gold mark. Well, 3,500 gold. But Rascal Jester's now looking to try and find their own play around Baron. Of course, there is that one Farsight alteration ward into the Baron, which means that they are spotted out. Mugen stepping forward with the Stride Breaker and the Undertow. And Cog would love to go forward with Revolver. He's got to be so wary of the polymorphs, though. And instead, he'll just buy space and try and zone people out. Ace secures the enemy team blue buff. Minion waves are shoving in mid in favor of V3. And Rascal Jesters are not in the best position here. They're being shoved up in the wrong direction. They've got waves in their base. And I don't know how easy it will be for them to get onto someone important here.
Well, Hatchback has popped the ghost. He hasn't popped the ghost yet, actually. That was just the chem tank. But he has been chunked out by some of these stray skill shots being thrown by V3. Rascal Jesters said, okay, right, let's go towards the Baron. Maybe we can force it for a dragon. Instead, V3 are now going to get engaged on.
It's a big exhaust, though, and Hollow is trying to be staying alive. He's going to go down, though. Recap gets it. The AD carry is dead while Cog was trying to shove him mid. It was a 4v5, and that is a massive, massive pick for the Jesters. The Jinx is dead, but what can Jesters get off the back of it? Maybe it's only a dragon, but it would be something.
It would be something. They can't go for a smite fight, though. 3 levels down in the jungle. Good 1, Lord. You can just about deal with. 2, it's achievable. 3 is kind of asking for that objective still to come through. They're trying to corral V3 at the pass. There is no teleport or a global onto Jinx. And Kanatu's just caught.
Flash is out. It's not enough. Ace gets that one. The Seraphine makes him fall to the floor. Fall to the floor would be the beat. And it's still secured by Hatchemetcha. Can't get in there, so it's at least a dragon. But it's a 1-for-1 now overall. Hollow died, so did Kinatu, but now with the man disadvantage for the next 30 seconds.
They're stopping the recalls. They're stopping the recalls.
The recalls they have, and that will mean that Baron is probably going to be V3's next call with that man advantage for the next 15 seconds. There is a teleport on Kinatu, though, which could make things much more achievable. Recap, the teleport as well, looking to go back. He's coming back, but it's not a great teleport location. Baron started up.
Yeah, because it's just on the player with the teleport, it's not as bad as it could be. But again, remember, smite advantage to the side of V3. Sol has himself the turrets and the Calibrum. He has that extra range. He can definitely play around this fight.
Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. But Seraphine set the stage. She's gone golden, though, but I'm not sure she wants a monument to that particular Grammy. Gets shut down. That one didn't last a long time in the top 10. It's a 1-for-1 right now. Jungler is dead for Rascal Jesters, and all the while, Jinx is starting to free fire. Sol is in danger. Reiner goes golden with his own stopwatch, trying to put down as much as he can. Sol goes up and down. The bounce is frustrated by a Glacial Fizzer put on ice and put into the dirt 6 foot deep. And he is going to be in the death chamber for the next 30 seconds. And V3, I think, have done it. They're going to get themselves a Baron. Cogcog's going to shove for the inhibitor. And they found themselves an incredible advantage in this game.
So not enough to end the game, but it may as well just be as good as it. Baron taken down, more gold in pocket. Rascal Jesters cannot dance to the beat, the tempo of the song that V3 is playing to them right now. It's going to be a 5-man Baron taken down by V3. And they are now going to group up one last time and try and death push in this series.
You should have known artists always sell better after their death. Seraphine falls, but the rest of the fight is all V3s. It's a Baron, it's an inhibitor, and we'll get a replay to see exactly how this one all played out.
It's Hatchemecha starting the fight off at half health yet again, down several levels. This front line is already behind on even HP. At least this time, well, I mean, at this time, he just walks up and Mugen just absolutely wails on him. We see that Ace gets caught out. It seems like in most of these games, Rascal Jesters win the fight if Ace is caught out early. We saw that in game 1. It just hasn't really repeated itself enough. One of the problems about taking Gravitum in Crescendum, because you just ran through that ammo, you can't stack up the chakrams when you have that Gravitum. It doesn't actually have that interaction, so sadly doesn't have the extra DPS. And Hollow wins out in the battle of the AD carries in that one. Yes, Soul is really putting up the game on his back.
Really
He's trying his best, but there is just too much HP for him to just try and chunk through.
And Cogcog again, just the boomerang poke in lane has been pretty obnoxious. Of course, you're into a beefy HP stacking Renekton. I get it, that's always a big deal, but V3 have got themselves a commanding position in this game. 6,500 gold. Sol's going to try and get on
Mugen,
down here. Could be in a dangerous
bad.
position. He's got Ragnarok, so he can at least ignore CC, but he needs to outplay this one real hard. Gonna get chunked out there.
Mugen,
Gonna try and run in. He's just dead. Far too aggressive in the shove. He went for the 1-3-1 and gets cut down. What can V3 get in trade, though? Maybe
trying to
only
stop the recall again.
turret.
Oh, it cancels the back.
That's going to be Sol's back cancelled. Kinatu goes forward to try and clear the way best he can, but it's going to be a 4v4 in here with no AD carry. To note for Rascal Jester, they leave the inhibitor turret, but not the inhibitor. And I think you take that kill onto Mugen there. It's a shutdown as well. Not sure who picked it up.
I think that ended up being Recap, I think. I'm trying to remember if Sol picked up that kill earlier
V3 could be
in
in a
the
difficult
game.
position here with Hollow having backed, actually, but Hatchet trigger.
But there's no one else there from Rascal Jester.
Yeah.
Yes, you can go with Hatchemecha if you really wanted to. There just was no follow-up at that point. Okay, going into this dragon fight in a minute, which may well happen. There is a teleport from Cogcog if he wants to try and split the map. You're going to have that Last Whisper and the Infinity Edge on Sol. At this point, you do have yourself an advisor. You have yourself an advantage in the AD carries. You have yourself a Flame Horizon. But if Jinx get the passive, you don't really care on Hatchemecha again caught out.
Like this, but he has got a wild growth, so stay alive. Mugen stepping forward with the Ragnarok. That's Kinatu with the front line, though, just eviscerated. Frontline advantage versus backline advantage. I name the Cogcog versus Kinatu. Secret about to fall down as well, just about survives, but Sol, all that 100 CS means nothing but 100 more seconds in the death chamber. Well, 45, but it might as well be an eternity, a century, because V3 are looking to knock this one out of the park. It ain't cricket. This has been a down and dirty game, and V3 have probably just sealed their way to finals.
Return to sender. Turns out the sender was the death realm for Rascal Jester. Second of the regular split, but not to be second in playoffs.
It was 2 5-game series to get them to the semi-finals, and then in the semis, V3 destroy our expectations. 3-0. They'll be facing Detonation Focus Me bright and early tomorrow.
Bright and early we were today. At least we get ourselves sent off early, get ourselves a little bit more sleep. V3, we had been ready to write them off. I mean, personally, I was here predicting Rascal Jesters, particularly after that Juggernaut match where, yes, we saw that DFM did beat them, but Rascal Jesters could actually come out with some good compositions and were strong in their skirmishing, strong in their team fighting. This time, it was not to be. V3 come out all guns blazing.
Absolutely, and a lot of it for me was a top and jungle difference. Mugen and Cogcog had an absolutely phenomenal series. 3 games of Nar for Cogcog. We saw the stats on screen. He made Kinatu weep in this series. And similarly for Mugen, every single game, it was a new strat to make Hatcher's life a living hell.
Yeah. And now, of course, well, we should have been doing this more during broadcast, I suppose, but now we have to look forward to DFM.
Hmm?
We have to look forward to V3 facing off against them. 3 playoffs, 3 series, a whole lot of games. It was 4 games back in spring, 5 in summer. Wait to see how many it will be tomorrow. We will be starting at that same time. We'll be here exactly the same time. Have a couple more faces involved, though, particularly some notable names, some silhouettes in the background. Check out our Twitter or join our Discord to find out more about that. But we know the players that will be on stage. I think particularly for me, this is going to be a really fun series to see what's happening with that Gnar, how it gets counterpicked by Ebby, by Cogcog, because both these players play the champion to a very proficient degree, and both have their own spice to deal with it.
That's going to be the big difference maker for me. I don't think Cogcog's going to have as an easier time getting lane advantages as against Ebby, which will be a big difference. And of course, Steel plays around topside very well. So I think
Mm.
that top jungle 2v2 could be very decisive tomorrow, especially considering how well Mugen and Cogcog played today. Very exciting stuff. That said, commiserations to Rascal Jesters. It's a frustrating way to go out the series. Their prep clearly didn't work against V3. They were a bit wrong-footed in the draft. The Hecarim never really managed to get going. They couldn't build the advantages through the bot they wanted. And they are going to fall out here in the spring. But credit to them. Fantastic regular series. Good showing versus DFM. It's just a bit of a sour note to end their spring on.
It is, because Rascal Jesters, well, I mean, they were worthy second place at the end of the split. V3 had faltered so badly, and they had dropped out of that third. Heck, they dropped down even a spot below that with a tiebreaker to Sengoku, who killed up. But then V3, who had struggled to take games off the top teams the entirety of this split, first beat Sengoku, the team just above them that they just lost to in the tiebreaker. Take down Rascal Jesters. They've beaten the third team, the second team, and now face the first team. Well, if there is a benchmark to be had in this split, well, V3 are looking to absolutely match it and overcome it.
Absolutely. I think we might need to hire ourselves some new script writers because I'm fairly sure I heard that story back in summer of
Mm.
2020, where Detonation Focus Me that time was struggling in the regular season, couldn't beat the teams above them, and then had to climb the gauntlets to take on an imperious V3 esports in the finals. It's reversed this time around. And we'll have to see whether V3 can
Yeah,
reverse the result as well, because that was a 3-2 victory to V3 Esports, which saw them become our world's representatives last year. This one's to become MSI representatives, and they might have taken down Rascal Jesters, but it's going to be a difficult one versus Detonation Focus Me either way, script or no script.
exactly. And I mean, in this series, we saw 3 red side victories back to back from V3.
Mm,
Actually, this is their 4th on the trot if you count that game 5, which of course you should
absolutely.
do between them and Sengoku. And now DFM, I now have to sit there and say, okay, which side are we prepping for tomorrow now? Because it seems like every team given the chance has chosen blue. V3 try and flip the script on the result of 2020. Would want to flip the script on the prep that these teams have been doing too. Now the question is, how much have they shown from this series, and how much can DFM prep for it? Because DFM, with adequate prep time, have been monstrous in the LJL. Remember back in spring 2020, a year ago, they lost that Juggernaut match to Sengoku. They took that time off and they said, all right, gonna get our act together, gonna rework our meta thoughts. They came back and they demolished the second half of their playoffs run. They only have a day to prep against V3 this time, but honestly, I think the onus is still on V3 to show that they can play up to, our overlords of DFM in
Mm.
this split at the least. But remember, V3 are the defending champions. They do have, they do still have, that mantle on their back. It's up to DFM to win that series, to claim it from them, to keep themselves in international contention.
Something about new kings versus old kings, I think, would be the statement if we were over on the LEC
Oh, that's just
broadcast.
that. That's just our geographical location. At least, yeah.
Indeed, and maybe the learnings is don't give Rascal Jesters, Gnar, Jinx, Red 1, 2, or if you do, have some counters available. See whether, of course, it all plays out that way tomorrow. Stick around and be here bright and early to witness Detonation Focus Me versus V3 Esports Spring Champions 2020 versus Summer Champions 2020. It's going to be a spicy one. It's going to be an interesting one. and hopefully it should be an absolute banger. Be here tomorrow. We have special guests. Keep an eye on the Twitter. Keep an eye on the Discord. We'll be announcing that later. But until then, we wish you a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the globe. And we'll see you tomorrow. And until then, matinee.